Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We are in our third professional development track of the day. I'm super excited for this one and really glad you could all join us. We've got a great presentation. I think a lot of you were with us last year, and Bill Johnson was our keynote last year and took us down a fabulous path and great discussion. He's going to follow up with part 2 this year, and he has agreed to shorten it a little bit for us so we can have a bigger discussion with 2 of our previous track presenters, Tonya Kauhi and David Moss. So I think for those of you that were here with us last year, you probably already know, but just quickly, so we, in the effort of saving time, welcome, Bill. Thanks for joining us. Bill was the previous State of New York GIO. Maybe not just the previous. Was there somebody in between you and me?
No. I was the first, okay. And Frank's the second.
Frank's the second. After he retired from state service, he spent about 2 years with the Universal Service Administrative Company, and in 2018 he joined AppGeo, where he is able to do Carpe Geo all the time for all of us. So welcome, Bill. I want to remind everybody to mute and turn off your video for the optimum viewing pleasure. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jenna, and good afternoon, everybody. It's really great to be back with AGIC. I have fond memories of joining you last year in Prescott, where I gave the keynote, which you may recall was called Carpe Geo and Parvum Momentum. Today, we're going to explore those ideas a little further, particularly on how Carpe Geo might apply to leadership development. Let's start with a quick recap. Here's the familiar Latin phrase carpe diem, which means seize the day. This is usually in the context of living in the moment or making the most of the here and now. But there's a deeper meaning: to go down a different path, try something new, stretch yourself, make the most of an opportunity. What I've observed over my career is that all of the interesting GIS projects I've been involved with followed a similar pattern. They didn't start with a clear set of requirements. Instead, they started with a simple request like, can you make me a map? And that led to a conversation about how to understand what was really needed. And that started a cycle of exploring ideas, experimenting, connecting the dots, seeing what works. It's about challenging yourself and seizing opportunities to do great things with GIS. I call this Carpe Geo. And the concept here is not about methods. It's an attitude, an ethic that can help you have a more fulfilling career. GIS is truly a great career. You're doing important work to help make government work better, to solve important problems, to help people understand complex situations, to make the world a better place. You're seizing those GIS opportunities. That's Carpe Geo. The scene here is from the 1984 movie This is Spinal Tap, which is one of my all-time favorites. It's about a fictional English rock band being followed by a reporter on their U.S. comeback tour. In this scene, lead guitarist Nigel Tufnell, played by Christopher Guest, is showing off his collection of guitars and equipment. He points to his favorite amp and indicates that all the dials go to 11, so he has a little something extra when all the other blokes only have amps that go to 10. This afternoon, I want to explain how Carpe Geo can give you a little something extra in your GIS careers, so you too can take it to 11. Now, I may not look terribly old, but I'm 60, and as I've grown older, I've given more thought to what's important, and especially how to apply whatever talents I have in whatever time I have left. And one of the things I've noticed is that we don't talk enough about this stuff, even though it's really important. Let me give you a brief story to illustrate this point. A couple of years ago, when I announced that I would be leaving my job at the Universal Service Administrative Company in Washington, D.C., just prior to joining AppGeo, one of the young data scientists that I worked with asked me if I had any advice I could share. He probably thought I'd give him a sentence or two, But I slept on it and decided to gather up my thoughts into a slide deck that I could share with him and a few others on the team. Here's that deck, and it amounted to 20 slides. The slides were all similar to this one. Nothing new, no epiphany here. In fact, I thought it was all common sense. I was actually afraid that they'd be disappointed because I was stating the obvious. But I was wrong. They loved it. The next day, some other people in the company came and asked me for the deck. So I posted it on Join the Conversation, the company's intranet site. Within a couple of days, it had been viewed more than 400 times, and it had become the most popular post in the 2 years since I worked there. Even the CEO mentioned it to me in my exit interview on my last day with the company. Needless to say, I was overwhelmed by the response. That little episode made it quite clear to me that there is a real hunger for this kind of deeper communication about how to conduct yourself, and in the process, how to gain more satisfaction from your work. There's some irony here to realize that people are eager to find better ways to work together at a time when our society seems to be fragmenting. I think there really is a fundamental need that we all have to cooperate in spite of any headwinds. And that brings us to the core of this presentation, how to help you develop as a GIS leader. Now, let me say right up front that I use the term leader in the broadest sense. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're at the top rung of the ladder. What it really means is that as you climb up the ladder, each rung requires a greater set of leadership skills. So these ideas really do apply at all levels. This should be familiar territory. You've got your base map layers at the bottom of the stack, which in this case are the skills associated with GIS fundamentals, along with written and oral communication, organization, analytics, and the other things needed to be a GIS professional. On top of those base layers, we're going to add some thematic layers. Are you with me here? Things like your approach to solving problems, how well you understand the context of your program, your ability to work with partners, and so on. We're going to take a look at these overlays through 3 different lenses to get a multidimensional perspective. I've given them scientific sounding names to make them sound scholarly, but the truth is I just made them up as I've thought about my own career. The first perspective is the GIS time allocation model. All of you have limited amounts of time, and you make choices every day about how to spend it, whether thoughtfully or just out of habit. My goal with this first model is to at least get you thinking about how you allocate yours. When I was first appointed as the GIO for New York State in 2013, one of the first things I did was to conduct peer interviews with 8 other state GIOs. You can see on this map who those folks were. There were a number of insights I learned from those interviews, but I think this is the most important takeaway. I took the responses and rankings from my interviews and summarized it in this graph. People skills, half of the priority pie, are far and away the most important way to spend your time. This is where your abilities as a collaborator, as a cat herder, as an advocate, as a leader come into play. This is the core of what makes a successful GIS leader. Another very interesting finding was that the tech elements, which here are flagged with red text, amount to less than 1/4 of the priority pie. In fact, these were cited by several as a weakness, something that GIS leaders are attracted to, but that can actually be a detractor from focusing on other priorities. I think that's quite interesting. And policy, which is essentially the rule book for everyone to follow, was recognized as not getting the attention it really needs. That's pretty interesting too, isn't it? But getting back to the half of the priority pie being anchored in people skills, I think this is the most important one. I realize here that I may be dating myself with this imagery from The Wizard of Oz, but I think it has all of the key elements. Dorothy, the Scarecrow, the Lion, and the Tin Man are on a journey to reach the Emerald City with many obstacles along the way. Do you know where your Emerald City is? If your GIS activities are 100% successful, what will that look like? What will that feel like? Do you have a yellow brick road, a strategic plan to get there? If you're the GIS leader, that's you, Dorothy. Who else but you would own the vision? What would the others do without that leader? They'd be going their separate ways, that's what. Leaders articulate a vision. This is super, super important. The vision should be the framework that aligns all of your activities. Because if any of your activities don't align, then by definition, they're obstacles to your progress. Your role as a GIS leader is to create the conditions that will entice others to follow you. And that, friends, is the vision piece. Others have to buy into that vision and be willing to work with you to achieve it. We're switching now to another scientific sounding perspective, the GIS career maturity model. I started out, as I imagine many of you did, as a techie. In my case, the mapping shop at the New York State Department of Transportation had just taken delivery of several Intergraph workstations, and I was one of the people that trained users, set up custom menus, coded lots of scripts, managed the files, and so on. I loved the work. I was eager to get into the office every morning, and I was thinking about work when I wasn't there. And I was good at it. It wasn't long before I got my first promotion, and along with that, I had new supervisory responsibilities for several mapping technicians who were doing digitizing and production work. Supervision required some new skills that I lacked, and managing production work meant that I had to have methods to track progress and verify the quality of the work. I found that I had to scale back on the amount of time I spent on technical work that I loved to accommodate these new responsibilities. At first, I found this objectionable. Tracking and compiling production data felt like accounting, which I considered drudgery. And I also found that the people I supervised wanted more of my time and attention than I thought I could spare, creating another irritation. Does any of this sound familiar? But eventually, I pulled up my big boy pants and grew into the new role. Over the years, more promotions followed, and each time required a recalibration and a readjustment. I imagine this mirrors your own career. With each step up, you have to shift your priorities, stretch yourself out of your comfort zone, and learn new skills. And with each step up, the required new skills involve less and less of the direct technical skills that made you successful at lower levels. They require that you learn much more about how to motivate people, how to see the larger view beyond your direct responsibilities, how to take initiative rather than waiting to be told what to do. Eventually, you realize that you've shifted far away from those initial skills that got you hired and excited about GIS in the first place. And that's what this career maturity model is all about. Some people reach a plateau because they can't let go of the early career skills so they can stretch themselves and grow into the new role. As you advance into a GIS leadership role, the most important things, as we just saw in the GIS time allocation model, are people skills and vision. Let's pause on that point for just a moment. Think about how different that is from the work at the start of your career. And maybe, just maybe, you'll see that you might need to stretch yourself a little bit further into that leadership realm, because that's where you can truly experience the full metamorphosis from a GIS techie chrysalis into a beautiful GIS leader butterfly. And finally, we have the Gis Half-Life Model. You may remember the concept of half-life from high school chemistry when you learned about how radioactive isotopes decay. Half-life represents the amount of time it takes for a property to decrease by half. Let's play this out in terms of GIS. And rather than decay, which sounds kind of depressing, let's rephrase it to mean how long these things retain their value. The small graph on the lower left depicts Moore's law, which predicts that computer processing speeds double every 2 years. You can see on this chart that Moore's law has been remarkably accurate over the past 40 years. But if we apply Moore's law to the technology elements of GIS, the hardware and the software we use, we can see that those technology components have a very short half-life. They decay, they lose their value very quickly. Data, on the other hand, has very long-lasting value. I started my career at the New York DOT in 1984, and the basic data systems they had in place to track highway and bridge conditions, traffic volumes, and motor vehicle accidents had already been in place for more than 20 years. Those same data systems have been modernized several times since then and moved into better containers with better software, but the fundamental records are largely the same today, 50 years later. Those databases, by the way, contain linear references, mile points along the highway, that were useful long before we had GIS tools to display them on a map. And in the late 1980s, I worked to build the linear referencing into our GIS highway network. And those core GIS functions are still in use today as the Velcro that attaches DOT highway data to the map. It feels pretty good to know that my work from 30 years ago is still relevant. Another interesting facet on the half-life of data is that its value declines initially as it ages, but then it levels off and the data takes on a new role for longitudinal or time sequence analyses. If you remember the keynote last year, I showed you an extreme example of this with historic maps of the Manhattan shoreline going back over a 400-year period. Partnerships are another element of GIS that can have a very long half-life. In government, once a process is in place, it tends to stay in place for a very long time. In New York, we started a partnership model for our statewide ortho imagery program in 2000 with a mix of state-funded base products and partner-funded upgrades. The partners loved the program then, and they still love it today. And that program is still working beautifully today, 20 years later. That makes me happy too. Policies tend to follow the same arc. Well-crafted policies are independent of tools and technology, and if they are sound and effective, they can survive indefinitely. Now, we could have an extended debate about the actual half-lives of all of these GIS elements, but the key point here is that the best place to focus our energy and effort is on the things with the most lasting value. And that almost always translates to more focus on data, partnerships, people, and policies. And just to be clear, I'm not saying that you should ignore technology. GIS is applied technology. You need to understand it at a high level, but my bet is that you can rely on others for the details. So now let's take those three different models on overlay skills for your role as a GIS leader and pour them through this Carpe Geo funnel to condense them into something simpler and easier to remember. We're trying to boil them down, let the sauce thicken, let the flavors intensify. We want something really tasty. This magic funnel will do that for us. And voila, the essence of Carpe Geo to help you be a better GIS professional and grow into a GIS leader. Seize, solve, share. Seize the opportunities. To do that, use those overlay skills on leadership, people skills, and vision. Is there something starting to happen that you can harness to help move your GIS program towards that vision? Can you get partners involved? Will it have lasting value? Don't wait for your boss to tell you what you need to do. Take the initiative and move it forward. Then start experimenting to solve the problem. Do this by tapping your GIS fundamentals, but not necessarily by having the technical chops to do it yourself. Hopefully you've matured in your career and you can work with a team of others whose energy, enthusiasm, and ideas can be applied to solve the problem. You understand what needs to be done, so motivate others to solve the problem. Take up the challenge. Encourage your team to try new ideas, think broadly, and ignore limitations. And through the whole process, share. Share the results widely. Share the data. Share the methods so that others can put them to use on their own problems. Share the credit for the successes. Share those small moments, parvum momentum, when you realize the value of your work. So there you have it, the secret sauce to help you take it to 11. Seize, solve, share. That's Carpe Geo. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. That was fabulous. So I want to share with you guys what we had thought for today. And maybe Tanya and David, you would turn on your video and join Bill and I. So everybody can see the four of us. Hi, Tanya. Thank you.
Hello.
And there's David.
Hello.
Wonderful. So what we were thinking was that we would have a conversation with all of you. You know, we've had a long day talking about professional development from a variety of approaches. You know, Tanya talked about staying connected and developing your own view of yourself so you can sell yourself and you can interact with people and you can achieve what you really want to achieve. And David talked about some really amazing perspectives on how to engage upper management. How do you motivate people? What's important? And of course, you know, we all love Bill. So I want to hear your questions. And I guess to get us started, I'm going to ask Tanya and David and Bill a couple questions and get your thoughts moving. And please add in the chat any questions that come up or anything you want to know about, because, you know, now is your time, really. So I want to start with maybe you, Tanya. What advice would you give your younger self to promote Carpe Geo in your career? What would you?
Start with a good one. No, that's a great question, and thank you, Bill, for that presentation. That was awesome. You just summarized it so well. But I think for me, you know, looking back, I think to be a little braver and to try things even though you don't know, you know, just give yourself permission to fail and come to your bosses with ideas. And, you know, even if you don't think it's your place or, you know, you have this idea and you're just worried that they're going to not love it or it's not going to go anywhere, I say still put it out there. So have the confidence to do that and fail. And they're just going to see that you really, you know, you're thinking of different ways. You're trying to communicate, you know, the power of geospatial technologies differently. And, you know, just really show your passion and don't be afraid to do that. Even if you don't think it will land anywhere. I mean, most of the time it does because it does have value. Yeah, so I would just say be a little braver, and for me to do that would have been nice if I would have realized that a little earlier, I think, but better late than never. So.
Right, I think that's a really good point, right? It's okay to fail. It's okay for your ideas not to work out, and it's okay to learn from that. That's how we grow, right? I think it's important to think about risking just in a new way. It's okay. You'll be all right whether you fail or not. You might end somewhere that. Yeah. Say that again.
The only thing I would say with that is, what's the definition of fail, right?
Right.
You're coming to them as the actual professional. Say, hey, I believe you could do this. They don't have an idea of what to do. So at the end of the day. As long as you can get through what you need to do and show some value, it's not a failure because they didn't have an answer.
Correct. Yep. That's a really good point. Yep. So David, what would you give your younger self to promote Carpe Geo? What would you say?
I would say quit holding on to being technical. I think I held on to being technical way too long. I didn't embrace what I was good at the end of the day, and I think there were some situations where I did a disservice trying to be technical and trying to be the manager at the same time, and I wasn't very successful overall because I couldn't do all of it, and so I had to just focus in one area and put all my energy there, and then once I did that, that's when the team was able to really take off.
It's awesome and tough, right? It's tough to identify that.
I can tell you right now, I don't know how to use. I mean, ArcGIS Pro scares me because I'm like, man, I used to know ArcMap. I don't know what ArcGIS Pro is now.
Yep. That's true. Bill, do you have anything to add to that whole concept?
No, I agree with those points very, very much. In fact, David, here I am, kind of at the high point of my GIS career, and I haven't used GIS myself in more than 10 years. People ask me what my favorite GIS software is. I tell them PowerPoint, because that's all I know how to do. It's take somebody else's stuff and throw it in the slide.
Right? That's a good point. So I want to get your opinions. Bill, what do you think the biggest challenge facing GIS leaders is today? I guess, given this year, even, what do you think that challenge is?
Well, I guess I'll start here. I think this pandemic has really upended everything. A lot of things that seemed like priorities that would stay stable are they've been turned over, and I think we're really presented with an unprecedented range of new opportunities. So I think we all have to look at this as a moment of opportunity to to kind of rethink about what we're doing with GIS and how to apply it. I mean, there's new kinds of problems that policymakers are going to want us as GIS professionals to do things on to support new policy initiatives. We're understanding things like, geez, this digital divide is really, really important now. There's a lot of people left behind in this shift to the online world that we're going through in the pandemic, and on and on and on. So I think just looking at this as a kind of a green field of new opportunities is part of what I would advise.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We had a couple questions come in while you were talking, Bill, that kind of bring us back to what David had mentioned earlier and what our previous conversation was. So one of them is from Shay Lamar. Bill and David both mentioned that you can't do everything. You need to move to management. But how did they fit that into their schedules when they were expected to get the technical things completed when they were newer to management or in small groups? How did you do that? You want to start, David?
All right. I'll chime in at any time. So one of the things I did was prioritize what we had. Okay. Understand what's the biggest bang for the buck. I think a lot of times we just take everything as it comes in. So it comes in at the queue, bam, bam, bam. I'll be honest with you, there's certain departments can wait. Okay, if you pay very little in my budget, you're kind of behind on the times where you're going to have to wait. So you have to prioritize that. And then one of the things I was able to do was talk to some of the departments that maybe want to do more GIS on their own and then train them. So you got to look at your team as an extension of everybody in your department or county, just not who you manage. So I had some folks in, let's say, public works that had the skill set, but nobody bothered to train them or give them more GIS to do. So I was like, all right, let's spend my time doing that, making sure my guys are trained up. And as my guys' priorities got limited and they got trained up and then those people got trained up, what I saw was actually I was getting more work done than me doing it.
Yeah, totally agree with that, David. And I think, what I had to learn was, you can't be the single point of failure. You got to be training others to do your job. And especially as you move on, you have to be, you have a fixed bandwidth. You have to, if you're going to take on new things, it's not like you can keep cramming more into the bag. You gotta let some things out. And that's what it takes.
And it's okay not to do certain projects. I mean, I know people don't like this. They really like, well, I can do it all. But what happens when you agree to everything and you don't complete it? What's worse? Not saying, hey, I can't get this done till 5 months down the line, or saying, yes, I can do it, and then taking 5 months to do it when they thought you were going to do it sooner. Mm-hmm. You got to look at that to the perception of your team. Then they're like, well, I don't want to ask you to do anything because you take too long. But if you up front, when they first come up and say, hey, to get you in here, I'm gonna have to. I had an example where one department we was working with, the folks we was working with didn't do the work we needed fast enough, and it came down to I had to get work submitted for the county overall or this one department. And I literally had to go tell my CIO and that department head, county is going to trump you. I will try to get them done, but if I know by this Friday, if I can't do it, we're going to wait on your rollout for your whole system, for your whole department, and I'm going to do what the county needs to get done first. Now, that was a tough to do a face-to-face. I didn't do an email or phone call, went in there face-to-face. But they appreciate it, and lucky for us, we was able to get it done. But I told them up front, here's the decision I'm going to make. And then my boss was like, yeah, they didn't meet the deadlines on their end, so there's nothing else we can do. But everybody knew the expectation up front, so there was no surprises.
Yeah, I think that's important, right? To manage expectations and to have those conversations, that's important. And to recognize what you're working with, like what you said. I think that's good.
Please
to kind of follow up on that, right?
Yeah, please don't send an email, phone call. You got to go sit in their office and talk face to face to them.
Yep, and do the hard thing. Yeah, agreed.
Hey, can I offer just sorry. Yeah.
No, please.
Okay, I was just going to offer a little bit of a different side of the leadership versus technical, because I have a much smaller group. I mean, we have a much smaller organization, and so I am a working manager. And for me, it took me understanding that I really like maintaining some technical experience and my foot kind of in that door and managing at the same time and leading at the same time. So there are positions out there. People aren't like ready to maybe commit to 100% managing people, and they still really want to keep that technical focus. There are, leadership and management positions out there. So just wanted to but know yourself, understand, like David said, he knew he was so great at leadership and managing that why keep the technical, and then that split his time about where his passion really lied. So, try to identify what you really like, be honest with yourself. For a while I thought, no, I have to go to total management and manage a huge team. And I don't think I'd be happy. And so David and I might be a little opposite that way. So just know who you are.
But you're great. You're great in your space. You're happy. So that comes out to everybody you work with, right? A happy person in their career does way more work than somebody is not happy.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, and it's funny because, Tanya, there was a follow-up question that you essentially answered, and that's what I was going to ask you. How do you be a GIS leader and keep in touch with technology? And I think you spoke really well about that, how you manage that. What's the middle ground? Do you, David or Bill, have anything to add to that, to what Tanya shared in that question of, is there, from your perspective, can you be a leader and still keep in touch with technology?
Well, I think there's an element, as Tanya pointed out, about the size of the organization. I mean, clearly there's limits to, how much you can hand off to others if there's only a very small number of people to hand things off to. But I do believe that as you advance in your career, you need to do less and less of that. And it's not like you walk away from the technology or, but, I know plenty about how GIS works and what it can do. I just don't know the latest, buttonology, what's the sequence of commands to make the software. But I don't need to, because in my role, what I need to be able to do is convince people of, what's the art of the possible is, and to want to participate and to help them understand the value of that. And, those are things that they're not separate and apart from the techie things. They're kind of a manifestation of the technical skills. So it's not like you're walking away from the technology. You're just exercising it at a different level.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, I would agree.
You can also have some, POCs or pilots or little projects that you get to work on where you're like, all right, I'm gonna work on this and do that. You just can't get lost in it, right? Like just like Tanya and Bill was saying, you gotta understand where you're good at and where your position is and what you can't do, right? Like if my position is so big, if I took the time to do that, I can't promote GIS. I can't go to the managers meetings. I can't, manage the team the way I have like 19 people. So it just kind of depends on where you are and being true to that.
Yeah, I think that's true. So I'll let any of you speak to this. There was a question from Jamie. What do you say to those people who don't want to be in management but want to grow in their field? What do you say to them?
Well, what do you mean by grow? I mean, if you want more money, it kind of depends on what you're looking for, right? If you want more money, but you want to be, say, an architect and you want as much money as you can get, well, then, you're working in government. You may not be able to get that in that government location or you're at. So, yeah, it just depends on what you truly looking for and where's the balance. And once you kind of know that, then yeah, you can take technical classes, you can do what you need to do to get stuff done, but you got to just recognize where you're trying to go.
And I would say, yeah, definitely agree with that, David. Just the nature of the organizational pyramid is that there's fewer positions the farther up you go. So more people are going to be, staying at lower levels and not really advancing as far on the management track. But you can still, you should always be growing and improving in your skills, even if you're working entirely in the technical realm. You want to be a lifelong learner, and if that's what's satisfying to you, that's wonderful. But recognize that there's going to be a ceiling to the positions you can aspire to if you want to stay entirely in the technical realm.
Yeah,
I think that's a great point, Bill. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was going to say it kind of goes to what Tanya spoke about in the earlier session of, developing your personal brand, getting to know yourself and what your goals are, what your values are, and where you fit, right? What brings you joy? And that may not be manager. That may be technical. That may be not having the responsibility of a supervisor, but still being able to have great vision and being able to really drive things in your organization. I think one is not limiting of the other. It's just a different choice. Go ahead.
Now, one thing I will say with that, though, is you need to tell your manager. Whoever you report to, don't assume they know. You need to tell them. Say, hey, here's what I'd like to do. Here's where I want to go. And those things, and make sure they're working with you to plan that out. I know a lot of people say, well, they don't know. If you haven't told them, they don't know. And then that's when they get stuck and they're in a position, they're doing stuff, and they're like, I don't know how that happened. And so you still have to have that leadership to talk to your manager and that understanding.
Yeah, no, that's totally
a great
true.
point. That's a really good point.
I like to refer to that as an honest conversation, and that works in every direction. Whether you're trying to attract partners or you're talking to your boss about your career goals or you're talking to people that report to you, just having a straight up honest conversation is so important. And don't hold back because you think they might not like what you have to say, or just you can be respectful and disagree, but you need to be honest. That's the most fundamental thing about it.
I remember I had a not so comfortable conversation with my with my boss when I first got hired. I want to say it was like the first 6 months, and we had a particular person on our team at that time that was this was my previous job, that was the highest paid person and was a senior, and I wanted to move and make division leads. And he's like, well, just have that person do it. I'm like, that person doesn't want to be a manager. He's like, but they're the highest paid and they're in that position. They should manage. And I'm like, they don't want to do it. So I was like, if you want a poorly run team and you want me to fire them after they do a bad job, that's what we're going to have. And so we went around and around for about a week on it. And he's like, all right, it's your team. Do what you want. Thank you. And that person never became a manager, and the team was perfectly fine, and we were very successful.
I can tell you right now, David, I would enjoy working with you.
Oh, that's great. So Troy put in the chat, I always said people will walk across hot coals for tacos. Never lose sight of the power of food in motivating people. So what have you found motivates employees the most? And any of you can take it.
Food's a great start, really. I think, all kidding aside, getting to know your team, really, more than just their job function, but getting to know them as individuals and, knowing about them personally is really important for a team to gel. And I think one of the great ways to do that is to, break bread together, go out and eat together, and have these casual conversations. Get together outside of the office. Those are all positive ways to help get to know folks. So I wouldn't laugh off the tacos comment at all.
And I heard David and Bill both say, and I totally agree with this, is that also giving them credit, making sure that they're highlighted and you highlight their successes and even learn from the failures. I think any time when you recognize the level of effort that they put out there and really appreciate it and thank them, I think is always good.
Also,
I think.
Oh, go ahead, Jenna.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I remember this was a few years back, and everybody had regular monitors in the office. And so our security team had got these these 34-inch curved screen monitors. And I happened to be in their back little cave that security was in. And I'm like, we can order those type of machines? Those monitors? Yeah, you can. So I went and bought the whole team and everybody in IT. To this day, we started that trend. Everybody in our IT department now has 34 to 7-inch curved screen monitors because the GIS team got them first. And I had 2 of them on everybody's machine. So people just came in and was like, oh my God, it was like Christmas. And I even remember, and this is a little side note, so I'm going to tell you guys this, but don't tell nobody. I spent my own GIS budget and bought 2 for a person in our data center that was in charge of architecture because I want them to build out my GIS environment for me. And to this day, I can call that person up and they'll do anything I want. And they were the first ones in their data center team to get those monitors. And so I would say just new keyboards, chairs, mice, monitor, just the small stuff. And don't even tell them it's coming. Just have it on their desk when they get there and people just line up. Little things like that go a long way, especially with the food too.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's showing that you've got the relationship, right? You know what people value. You know what people trust, what people want. In an IT world, for me, if somebody bought me a big monitor, wow, I wouldn't do anything for you. I think learning what are the needs and fulfilling those needs to make the job easier, right? To make the things that are tedious, that are difficult, that aren't motivating, to make those things easier and less difficult, so we can do more.
Yeah, I had one guy that had the keyboard since he was hired 20 years ago, and I'm like, my goodness, yeah, I know he didn't just want to keep it, but he didn't know how to ask. And so, just so happy when he got his first wireless keyboard, and it was ergonomical and everything.
Oh, that's great. So Priyanka asked, in your career, what worked in building a strong, motivated team? What's your personal experience? What were the things that really mattered? Do you want to start us off, Tanya?
Yeah, I think for the teams I've led, it's really that shared vision. I think to really make sure you're on the same path, and I think being as transparent and clear as possible. And not to say that if they have differing opinions, you don't listen to those, but just make sure you're all working towards the same goal. I think is it works very well to motivate the team. Make sure they understand what they're working towards and that how they can contribute and be part of it. Yeah.
That's great. David, do you have anything that you can add about what worked in building a strong, motivated team beyond monitors and keyboards?
Yeah, definitely what Tanya said is one, and then what Bill said earlier, knowing them as people, like, understanding them as a person and what's important to them, where they kind of want to go in their career. Some people had never been asked that. They was like, well, I don't know what I want to do. I'm like, that's perfectly fine. Take the time and think about it, and I want to help you get there. And also bringing in new talent. As much as I like the team I have, I always look to bring in new talent that maybe have a little bit different motor, a little bit different drive. That really helps teams that may have been there for a while and maybe got comfortable, because people compete, right? At the end of the day, people are competitive. So they see somebody else coming in and doing something like this or doing that, and then they're like, oh, well, I could do that. And then they start looking to do it. And so now they're competing amongst themselves, healthy competition. And I think that goes a long way too.
Great.
I would add that what you want is, a very respectful set of relationships among the group so that everybody feels totally comfortable sharing their ideas. Because what you don't want is everybody to just agree on something. What you want is a variety of viewpoints, as you end up with much better results, much better solutions when you debate and you bounce ideas around, you try things, you shift to other things, and you eventually find the strongest solution. But you don't get there if I totally disbelieve in like the superhero thing, like that one person with this brilliant idea and everybody else is just there to support that. No, that's the best stuff comes from groupthink, and groupthink requires a respectful atmosphere where everybody feels like they're a contributor and not being overshadowed.
Conflict is okay. Healthy conflict is okay. It's okay.
Yeah. I think, for me, it's really helped me in my career and in my position to have the naysayer, right? So to have a difference of opinion among my team, really, it makes me grow. It makes me challenged. I think that's a healthy thing, to have conflict, like you said. It doesn't have to be something that is personally difficult. There's a difference between the personal and the professional, right? So I think recognizing those kinds of challenges really do build a better team. I think that's good.
And I think if you're working a team like that, you'll know if they personally are struggling with something and it's not work related, right? And that sometimes that happens with a good team member. They're personally struggling with something and it affects their work. But people that don't pay attention then want to dock them on their work versus understanding where that may be coming from,
Right.
So, and that's especially big now with COVID, trying to understand what people got going on at home and things like that, say, hey, it's okay. Take a couple days. We got you. We'll finish the project for you. Those things. I mean, I've had to tell, hey, I'm going to force you to take time off. Literally. If I catch you answering the email or I call you, if you answer the phone, you're in trouble.
So I'm gonna switch gears a little bit, and we got a question in the chat about the greatest barrier you had to deal with in your career. What was it, and then how did you deal with it? I think we should just kind of go around. Bill, do you want to start us off?
Okay. I had at one point in my career a very difficult boss. And that was a tough stretch for me. It really was, because there was a little bit of the alpha male competitiveness going on, and he didn't, I think he viewed me as a threat in some capacity. And so I had to kind of do what does not come naturally, which was to kind of back down and retreat. And eventually he was not very successful in his role, and was moved off, and somebody much better came in, and I was able to kind of establish a much better relationship with a new boss. But so there are times when things are just not going to go your way, and you just have to ride it out. You have to deal with it, and make the best of the situation. I got less done in that period. That was like a year and a half, and it was tough. There were a couple of days I actually I was dragging myself to work almost against my will, because I knew I wasn't making the progress I wanted. That's not where you want to be. So
Right.
Bill was nice.
That's tough.
It was nice. I had mine, and I left. I was like, I ain't dealing with it. Life's too short. And he's still there. He's still there, and he's still messing up stuff, but it ain't my problem more. I think, but at the end of the day, yeah, you have to kind of evaluate that, and everybody personally what they want to look like. And when I was in that situation, the person wasn't direct boss, but they were like in charge of the whole department, and so it got to the point where I heard from department heads that they had a meeting amongst all the department heads asking what projects I was bringing up in GIS, because before it used to come top down. And so I was working with everybody and knew who everybody's positions were. And now it was going up. It was going bottom up. And so this particular person did not like that. So they had a 1-hour meeting about what projects was I bringing on and whether they had sanctioned those projects. But they all had, because I had it done right. I had it in writing and everything. And so it was kind of funny. And then, at conferences, there was issues because they would ask me to present at conferences, and I would do that, but then that person didn't like the type of attention I was getting from presenting the stuff that they asked me to present on. I'm like, well, if you ask me to do something, I'm not going to be bad at it. I don't know what that means. So, so I just felt that it was to move on, because I didn't want to be complacent and decide not to be good at what I was good at.
Mm.
Yeah. What about you, Tanya? What the question was? Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. The biggest barrier.
The biggest barrier.
Okay. I think for me, it was probably myself, and really seeing myself in that leadership role. And I think just gaining the confidence and learning as you go, and knowing that you're not going to have all the answers, but you can surround yourself with great people to figure it out. I mean, that I think for me was the biggest barrier. And interesting enough, I actually had probably my most challenging boss at that time. And I think I grew a lot more because of it, because he kept pushing me in directions. I was like, I don't know about this, and I don't like that. And so, that kind of went hand in hand when I look back at it now. So again, it's mostly my thing about visualizing yourself in that position and knowing you can do it. Give yourself some credit, and what's the worst that can happen if you try it, right? So,
well, we are glad you did, Tanya.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So we have a question in the chat about bad leaders. How, and you spoke a little bit about this, Bill, in talking about your greatest barrier was a difficult leader that you were under. But the question is, I'll read it as it was written. How do you recognize if you're a bad leader and identify what you need to improve on, especially if your team are too nervous to tell you? What kind of advice do you have for that scenario?
Yeah, I would say you want to listen to others. You always think of yourself differently than others do. And it doesn't really matter what you think of yourself. What matters is, how you're perceived and how others react to you. There's this concept of a 360-degree review some organizations use, where people above you comment on your performance, and people below you comment on your performance. So it's kind of a 360 view of yourself, and those are really important. For you to understand how others are seeing you. You may not think of yourself as aggressive, or you may not think of yourself as intimidating. I've had those comments, that have come out in those kind of reviews, and I realize, oh yeah, I mean, I guess I don't think of myself as being aggressive, but I can come on kind of strong, and that can be off-putting to people. And so I gotta dial it back. I gotta remember to dial it back, because I don't want to alienate people that I need to be on the team. So I think just listening to others, trying to adjust accordingly is important.
Yeah, I would agree. I think you made a really good point, Bill. And I think we all struggle with this a little bit, the difference between how we see ourselves and how others see us, right? There's like a wide, like, surprising view of how I'm perceived and how I perceive myself. I think, there have been other discussions that I've had on calls like this about what stops us from climbing our own ladder, meeting our own goals. A lot of that is our own perception, right? I'm my worst enemy. I'm the one that puts the biggest barriers. I think that's true. So we've got 3 minutes. What would you like to share with everybody as we wave off for the day and our leadership day? Bill, do you want to start out?
I would just say, every step up in your career is going to take you out of your comfort zone, and it's going to feel scary, and it should, because if you're in your comfort zone, you're not growing. You're just staying in the comfort of your nest. So don't be scared. You got to trust yourself. You got to bet on yourself, and go ahead and step out of the nest and take, create that space to grow.
Yeah, I would agree. David?
I definitely agree with Bill. Bill is awesome, by the way. Well, I just want to say that.
Thank you.
I just want to say, at the end of the day, don't do it for the wrong reasons. All right. If you take that position, or you're in that position, and it's not to see your staff grow, it's not to see GIS grow in your department, things like that, then I would say be honest with yourself, and then, work towards recognizing how you can make those things happen. Because with the person said with the bad leadership and all those things, a lot of that turns in because a person became a leader and they didn't really want that. They did it for the wrong reasons, and now they're stuck with it. And they're like, I don't know how to change that. I don't know how to address it. And, and you may have to, move yourself out of that situation, or do things a little different, but I would also just say, definitely, help your staff develop, make that environment where they're happy, they want to be there every day, and all the great work that you will get done and all the things that will happen will be because of your staff. And I would say it's 80-20, man. My staff bring 80% of all the great ideas. I bring 20. And I wouldn't have it any other way.
That's great. Tanya, you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, I think obviously Bill and David, they're awesome, and I couldn't say it better, but I would just maybe add that, don't wait for your boss or whoever the person is. Don't wait for somebody to come to you. If you want to do something and you want to try something and you really feel passionate about it, find a way to do it. And I think that just take the risk, as Bill said, and go for it. And, you'll learn a lot about yourself. And especially, I totally agree. If you're uncomfortable, you're in the right space. You're growing. So. Yeah, just don't wait. Don't expect people to come to you and say, hey, I got this great opportunity for you. Take the initiative and do it.
Excellent. Thank you all. I can't thank you enough. This has been a great session. I appreciate you coming in and having the discussion, and thanks, Bill. Carpe Geo 2, I know I said it wrong, was fabulous. And thanks everybody. Really glad that you were with us today.